My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 32 years old, and the day my father was buried, my family stood around his grave pretending to mourn him while hiding the last words he ever wrote to me. I did not know it then. I stood there in a black dress, with rain touching my hair and mud sinking under my heels, thinking the worst thing that day was losing my father. I was wrong. The worst thing was realizing, only hours later, that the people standing beside his coffin had not just taken away my chance to say goodbye. They had stolen his final truth. My older brother Mason held my mother's umbrella like a devoted son. My Aunt Rachel cried loudly into a lace handkerchief, making sure everyone saw her grief. My cousin Paige kept one arm around my shoulder, whispering, "Be strong, Evelyn," even though her eyes never stayed on me for more than 2 seconds. And my mother, Evelyn Carter, stood at the front of the grave with her chin lifted, wearing pearls, black gloves, and the kind of sorrow that looked carefully practiced in a mirror. Everyone said she was holding herself together beautifully. I thought she looked relieved. I hated myself for thinking that. A daughter should not look at her mother at her father's funeral and feel suspicion. But that was the thing about my family. They taught you to doubt yourself first. If something felt wrong, they called you dramatic. If someone hurt you, they called you sensitive. If you asked questions, they called you disrespectful. And if you noticed a secret before they were ready to admit it, they made you feel guilty for having eyes. So when my father's funeral ended and everyone walked back toward the cars, I tried to silence the small voice inside me. The one asking why Mason had been in Dad's study the night before. The one asking why Mom had changed the funeral program at the last minute. The one asking why Uncle David would not look at me when I asked whether Dad had left any personal instructions. The one asking why my father, who always wrote everything down, had supposedly left no message for me. No letter, no note, no final words, nothing. My father was not a silent man. He was quiet, yes, but quiet people often carry the deepest words. His name was Henry Carter, and he had built his life with his hands. He was not rich in the way my mother's family cared about. He did not wear expensive watches or talk loudly about investments. He owned a small woodworking business on the edge of town, making furniture, cabinets, and custom pieces people kept for decades. He believed a table should survive a family. He believed chairs should feel like they welcomed you. He believed wood remembered the hands that shaped it. And he believed promises mattered, even when nobody else was watching. That was why his silence at the end did not make sense. Dad and I had always communicated through small rituals. Every birthday, he wrote me a letter. Not a card with a printed poem. A real letter. 3 or 4 pages, written in his strong, slightly slanted handwriting. When I turned 10, he wrote that kindness was not weakness. When I turned 16, he wrote that I should never shrink myself to fit inside someone else's comfort. When I turned 21, he wrote that the world would try to make me useful before it let me be loved. When I turned 30, he wrote, "One day, Evelyn, you will understand that not every person who smiles at the family table is feeding you. Some are waiting to see what they can take." At the time, I thought he meant the world. Later, I understood he meant our family. So when Dad died suddenly at 64, everyone expected me to fall apart. And I did. But even inside the grief, a part of me waited for his letter. I thought maybe he had left one with Mom, or Mason, or the lawyer, or hidden in his study, tucked inside one of his old books, the way he used to hide notes for me when I was little. But nobody mentioned one. Not before the funeral, not during, not after. And when I asked, my mother looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Evelyn, must you turn even today into a search for attention?" That silenced me. Not because I believed her, because grief had made me weak, and old wounds still knew where to press. The reception was held at the Carter house, not my home anymore. I had moved out at 24 after a fight my mother still described as Evelyn's Little Independence performance. But the house still carried pieces of my childhood. The long hallway where Dad used to measure our heights on the doorframe. The kitchen window where he set fresh flowers every Sunday, even when Mom said they made the counter look messy. The back porch where he taught me how to sand wood with the grain, never against it. And the study, his study, the one room in that house that felt like him, warm, cluttered, honest. The reception smelled of coffee, perfume, wet coats, and polite lies. Neighbors came and hugged my mother. Business associates shook Mason's hand. Aunt Rachel accepted sympathy like she was the widow, not my mother. Paige drifted through the rooms collecting gossip in whispers. I stood near the staircase holding a cup of tea I never drank. People said the usual things. He was a good man. He loved his family. He was proud of you. That last one always made my throat tighten, because I knew Dad was proud of me. But my family had spent years making me feel like his pride was something I had stolen from them. Mason was the golden child, at least on paper. He was 36, handsome, confident, and dressed like someone who believed success was an outfit. He worked in real estate development, though worked was generous. Mason knew how to sell ideas, charm older investors, and borrow credibility from other people. He had Dad's name, Mom's approval, and the ability to turn every conversation back to himself. When Mason failed, Mom called it pressure. When I failed, she called it pattern. When Mason needed money, it was an investment. When I needed help, it was irresponsibility. Dad saw through him, though he rarely said it loudly. That was part of the tension in our family. My mother praised Mason because he looked like the future she wanted. My father trusted me because I noticed what was real. And Mason hated that. He hated that Dad asked my opinion about the workshop. He hated that Dad showed me account books. He hated that Dad taught me the names of his longtime clients. He hated that when something mattered, Dad got quiet and looked for me. I never asked for that. But in families like mine, love is treated like inheritance. If one person receives it, another believes something was taken. Around 3 p.m, after most guests had left, I finally gathered enough courage to ask again. My mother stood in the dining room with Aunt Rachel and Paige, discussing which flower arrangements should be kept and which should be donated. Mason was near the fireplace, checking his phone. Uncle David, my father's younger brother, sat alone by the window, turning his coffee cup slowly in both hands. I approached my mother. "Mom." She did not look up. "Yes?" "Did Dad leave anything for me?" Her hand froze over a vase of white lilies, only for a second. Then she continued arranging stems. "What do you mean?" "A letter." Mason looked up from his phone. Aunt Rachel stopped talking. Paige glanced at Mason. That tiny movement told me everything and nothing at once. My mother sighed. "Evelyn, please. I'm just asking. This is not the time." "When is the time?" Her eyes lifted sharply. I felt 10 years old again. "You think because your father spoiled you with little notes, every serious moment must include some dramatic message for you?" My face went hot. "He wrote to me every year. He wrote to everyone." "No," Mason said, too quickly. "He didn't." The room froze. My mother turned slowly toward him. Mason realized his mistake. I saw it. So did Uncle David. "What does that mean?" I asked. Mason slipped his phone into his pocket. "It means nothing. I just mean Dad wrote things down. Receipts, plans, shop notes. You always made it personal." My mother gave a small nod, accepting the rescue. "Yes, exactly." I looked at them one by one. "Did he leave a letter?" My mother's voice softened, which was always dangerous. "Sweetheart, your father was tired. He was ill. He did not spend his final days writing sentimental secrets. He died of a heart attack. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The room went colder. My mother's face hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" There it was. The trap. Ask a question. Get accused of cruelty. I swallowed. "No." "Then stop." Uncle David stood suddenly. His chair scraped the floor. Everyone looked at him. "I need some air," he muttered. He walked out through the back door. I stared after him. Something in his face looked guilty, not sad. Guilty. That night, I stayed after everyone left. I told Mom I wanted to help clean. She said, "That won't be necessary," which meant she wanted me gone. So I said I had lost one of my earrings and needed to check upstairs. It was a small lie, but after a day of being lied to, I did not feel bad. Upstairs, the hallway was dim. Dad's bedroom door was closed. The study door was locked. That stopped me. Dad never locked his study. Not when he was alive. Not even when Mason visited and borrowed things without asking. I stood in front of the door, staring at the brass knob. Locked. Why? Footsteps sounded behind me. I turned. Mason stood at the top of the stairs. "What are you doing?" I kept my face calm. "Looking for my earring." "In Dad's study?" I was going to check everywhere. His smile was thin. "It's locked." I noticed. Mom locked it. Too many people in the house today. Dad never locked it. Dad isn't here. The sentence hit like a slap. Mason saw it land and did not apologize. He stepped closer. "You need to stop making this harder on Mom." I almost laughed. "On Mom?" "Yes, she lost her husband. I lost my father. And somehow you still make yourself the center." That was an old line. I had heard versions of it my whole life. When I cried at 16 because Mason ruined my graduation dinner, I was making myself the center. When I objected to Mom selling Dad's handmade pieces without asking him, I was making myself the center. When I moved out, because I could no longer survive being compared to Mason, I was making myself the center. Now I wanted my father's final words, and again, I was the problem. I looked at Mason. "What are you afraid I'll find?" His eyes changed, only for a second, but enough. "Nothing." "Then unlock the door." He smiled. "No." "Why?" "Because it isn't your house." That one hurt because it was true in the legal sense. The house belonged to Mom. The workshop belonged to Dad's business. The family history belonged to whoever controlled the paperwork. And I had spent my whole life learning that truth without ownership could be buried. I moved past him toward the stairs. He caught my arm, not hard, but enough to make me stop. "You need to let this go," he said quietly. I looked down at his hand, then back at him. "Let go of me." For a second, he did not. Then he did. I left the house with my heart pounding. Outside, Uncle David stood beside my car. The porch light made him look older than he had that morning. He held a cigarette between his fingers, though I had never seen him smoke. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. "What's going on?" He looked toward the house. "Grief makes people strange." "Don't do that." His eyes returned to mine. I stepped closer. "Did Dad leave me a letter?" David's face changed. There it was, not surprise, not confusion, pain. He knew. My breath caught. "He did, didn't he?" David looked away. "Evelyn." "Where is it?" "I can't." "Can't what?" He rubbed his forehead. I promised your father I would protect you. By hiding the truth? His jaw tightened. That letter is dangerous. My whole body went still. Dangerous. Not emotional. Not private. Dangerous. What did he write? David looked toward the upstairs window. The curtain in Dad's study moved. Someone was watching. Mason. Or Mom. David's voice dropped. Not here. Then where? He hesitated. Tomorrow morning. 7. Your father's workshop. Why not now? Because if they know I spoke to you, they'll move everything. Everything? He stepped away from my car. Go home. Don't answer Mason's calls. Don't tell your mother anything. And Evelyn? What? His face twisted with grief. Your father didn't leave you nothing. Then he walked back toward the house before I could ask another question. I drove home shaking. My apartment felt too quiet. I placed my black heels by the door, still muddy from the cemetery. I took off my dress and hung it over a chair. I washed funeral makeup from my face and stared at myself in the mirror. 32 years old, fatherless, exhausted, and suddenly certain that my family had hidden something from me before Dad's body was even cold. I barely slept. Every sound outside my apartment made me sit up. At 2:13 a.m., Mason called. I did not answer. At 2:20, my mother called. I did not answer. At 2:34, Paige texted. Hey, are you okay? Mason said you seemed upset. Don't spiral tonight. Don't spiral. That was family language for stop noticing things. I deleted the message. At 6:30 in the morning, I was already in my car. The sky was gray. The town looked washed clean and empty after the rain. Dad's workshop sat behind the old Carter furniture building on the east side of town. The front showroom had been closed for years except by appointment, but the workshop still smelled like sawdust, oil, varnish, and him. I parked behind the building. Uncle David's truck was already there. The back door was open. Inside, the machines were still. No table saw humming. No sander buzzing. No dad singing old country songs under his breath while pretending he wasn't. Just silence. David stood near Dad's main workbench. His face was pale. On the bench sat a small wooden box. I recognized it immediately. Dad made that box when I was 19. Walnut, brass hinges, a tiny carved line along the lid. He told me once it was for unfinished things. I thought he meant wood pieces. Now I was not so sure. David touched the box but did not open it. Your father gave this to me 3 weeks ago, he said. 3 weeks? He knew something was wrong. My throat tightened. He didn't tell me. He wanted to. Then why didn't he? David looked at me. Because he was afraid if he moved too soon, they would destroy the evidence. The word evidence landed heavily between us. Evidence of what? David opened the box. Inside was an envelope. Cream paper. My name written across the front. Evelyn. Dad's handwriting. My breath broke. For a moment I could not touch it. That handwriting had wished me happy birthday, given me advice, apologized when he worked late, taught me how to tell oak from ash, and once left a note in my lunchbox that said, "You are allowed to take up space." Now it sat in front of me like a door back to him. I reached for it. David caught my wrist gently. Before you read it, you need to know something. What? He swallowed. Your mother and Mason came here the night after he died. My blood went cold. What? They searched the workshop. For this? And other things. What other things? David glanced toward Dad's locked filing cabinet. Business records, property papers, bank statements, client contracts. I shook my head. Why would they? A sound interrupted me. Outside, tires on gravel. David's face changed. He moved quickly to the window and looked out. Damn it. What? He turned back. Mason. My heart slammed against my ribs. How did he know? David grabbed the envelope and shoved it into my hands. Read it later, not here. But it was too late. The back door opened. Mason stepped inside wearing a dark coat, his face cold and wide awake. Behind him stood my mother. Black dress, pearls, perfect hair, and no grief left in her eyes. Her gaze landed on the envelope in my hand. For the first time in my life, I saw real fear on her face. Not sadness, not anger, fear. Mason looked from me to Uncle David. Then he smiled. Well, he said softly, I guess the funeral wasn't quite over after all. Mason stood in the workshop doorway like he had already won. That was always his gift. Even when he was afraid, he knew how to wear confidence. My mother stood behind him, perfectly dressed for a second day of mourning. Black coat, pearl earrings, hair pinned neatly at the back of her head. Anyone passing by would have seen a grieving widow. But I saw her eyes. They were fixed on the envelope in my hand. Not on me, not on Uncle David. On the letter. Dad's final letter. The one they said did not exist. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The workshop smelled like sawdust and rain. Morning light slipped through the dusty windows, touching the workbench where Dad had spent half his life shaping wood into things that lasted longer than people's promises. I tightened my fingers around the envelope. Mason's smile widened a little. Evelyn, he said, calm and smooth. Give that to Mom. I stared at him. Not please, not let's talk. Give that to Mom. Like I was still the little sister who had to hand over whatever he wanted. My mother stepped forward. Her voice was softer, more dangerous. Evelyn, sweetheart, you're emotional. That letter may upset you. I almost laughed. My father wrote it to me. He was not well. He had a heart attack. He was under stress. Because of what? Her mouth tightened. Mason moved closer. That's enough. Uncle David stepped between us. No, Mason, it isn't. Mason's eyes cut toward him. You had no right to bring her here. David's jaw clenched. Henry asked me to. My mother's face changed, only slightly. But I saw it. Dad had known. Dad had planned this. Dad had trusted Uncle David. And my family hated that. Mason pointed at the letter. That belongs to the estate. I looked down at my name written in Dad's handwriting. No, it belongs to me. You don't even know what's inside. Then why are you scared? The words came out before I could stop them. The workshop went silent. My mother blinked once. Mason's smile disappeared. Uncle David looked at me like he had been waiting years for me to say exactly that. Mason stepped closer. Evelyn, don't start acting clever. That old anger rose in me. Not loud, cold. All my life, Mason had treated me like being quiet meant being slow. He thought because I took time to speak, I had no thoughts. He thought because I loved peace, I would avoid conflict. He thought because I cried easily when I was young, I could be controlled by pressure forever. But grief had burned something clean inside me. I was tired. Tired of being corrected. Tired of being managed. Tired of being told my pain was inconvenient. I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket. Mason saw the movement. His face hardened. Give it to me. No. He reached for my arm. This time, Uncle David shoved him back. Not hard enough to hurt him, hard enough to shock him. Mason stumbled one step and stared at David like a king slapped by a servant. "You touch her again," David said quietly, "and I'll forget we share blood." My mother gasped. "Mason, stop." Not because he was wrong, because he was losing control. Her eyes shifted toward the windows, toward the street, toward witnesses that were not there. That was my mother. She did not fear sin. She feared being seen. Mason straightened his coat. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We are not fighting in Dad's workshop like animals." "No," I said. "You're fighting because he left me something you wanted hidden." My mother's voice dropped. "Evelyn, listen to me. Your father was angry when he wrote that letter." "At who?" She looked away. That told me enough. "At you?" I asked. Her face turned pale. Mason laughed, but it sounded forced. Dad was confused. He had been forgetting things. No, he hadn't. You weren't around enough to know. That one hit hard, because it was one of their favorite weapons. I had moved out. I had built my own life. I had stopped attending every dinner where I was insulted with polite smiles. So they called it abandonment. They said I wasn't around. They ignored the fact that Dad visited my apartment every Sunday morning with coffee and fresh pastries. They ignored the fact that he called me from the workshop when he finished special pieces. They ignored the fact that I knew the sound of his cough changing before any of them noticed. "I was around," I said. Mason scoffed. "You came when it suited you." Uncle David snapped. "She was the only one Henry trusted." That landed like a hammer. My mother went completely still. Mason's mouth opened, then closed. I looked at David. "What does that mean?" He looked tired. So tired. "It means you need to read the letter." My mother stepped forward quickly. "David!" He turned on her. "No, Vivian. Enough." Her eyes flashed. "Careful." I've been careful for 20 years. That shocked me. 20 years? I looked between them. The workshop seemed to shrink. "What has been going on?" I asked. Nobody answered. Then Mason's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His expression changed. "Mom," he said under his breath. She looked at him. He turned the screen slightly toward her. I could not see what it said, but whatever it was made her face tighten. Uncle David noticed too. "What did you do?" Mason slipped the phone away. "Nothing." David stepped toward him. "Mason." My mother lifted her chin. "We should all go back to the house and discuss this privately." "No," I said. Her eyes snapped to me. "No? I'm done discussing things in rooms you control." For a second, I saw something like hatred in her face. It vanished quickly, replaced by wounded motherhood. "Oh, Evelyn," she whispered, "your father's death has made you cruel." That used to work. The guilt, the soft voice, the suggestion that my anger was a moral failure. But the letter was warm against my coat, and Dad's name was still alive in my hand. "No," I said. It made me awake. I turned to Uncle David. "Can we leave through the back?" He nodded. Mason moved toward the door. "I'm not letting you walk out with that." David grabbed a heavy wooden mallet from the bench and held it at his side. He did not raise it. He did not threaten. He simply held it. Mason stopped. My mother stared at David with disgust. "You would really turn on family?" David's face twisted. "No, Vivian. I'm finally turning toward it." He took my elbow gently and guided me through the side door into the back lot. Rain had started again, soft this time, cold mist touching my face. We got into his truck because Mason had parked behind my car. David started the engine with shaking hands. As we pulled away, I looked back. Mason stood in the workshop doorway, phone pressed to his ear. My mother stood beside him. Neither looked like mourners anymore. They looked like people whose secret had begun slipping out of their hands. David drove in silence for nearly 10 minutes. I held the letter in my lap. I wanted to open it. I was terrified to open it. Finally, he pulled into the parking lot of a closed diner outside town. No cars, no people, just gray sky and old neon. He turned off the engine. "Read it," he said. I looked at him. What am I about to find? His throat moved. The truth Henry died trying to fix. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were 4 folded pages. Dad's handwriting filled them. Strong, slanted, familiar. At the top, he had written, "My Evelyn." That was enough to break me. I covered my mouth. David looked out the window to give me privacy. After a moment, I forced myself to continue. "If you are reading this, then I am either gone or no longer able to speak for myself. I am sorry, sweetheart. I wanted to tell you everything face to face, but I waited too long, and waiting is sometimes just another kind of cowardice." I stopped. Dad. Cowardice? My father had never been a coward in my eyes. Quiet, yes. Patient. Sometimes too patient. But not a coward. I kept reading. "You have spent your life thinking your mother simply did not understand you, and that Mason was selfish in the ordinary way spoiled sons can be selfish. I let you believe that because I thought protecting you from the full truth would spare your heart. I was wrong. It only left you alone with people who learned to smile while cutting you." Tears blurred the page. My mother's words came back. Sensitive, dramatic, attention-seeking. Dad had known. He had seen it. "Your mother has been trying to push me to change my will for 3 years. Mason wants control of the workshop, the Carter property, the client accounts, and the trust your grandfather left in my name. They told me you had no interest in the business. They told me you would sell anything I left you. They told me I was foolish for trusting you." My breath caught. The will, the workshop, trust. I looked at David. He nodded grimly. I read on. "They lied. I know they lied because I saw the papers Mason prepared. I saw the forged transfer drafts. I saw the emails between him, your mother, and Paige. Your cousin has been helping them gather documents from my office. Rachel knows more than she admits. David has copies of what I found. So does my attorney, if they have not already pressured him." Paige, Aunt Rachel. My cousin who hugged me at the funeral. My aunt who cried louder than anyone. My stomach turned. "Evelyn, listen carefully. The workshop is yours. Not because Mason is unworthy, though God forgive me, he has become exactly that. It is yours because you understand what I built. You understand that this place is not just machines and wood. It is trust. It is hands. It is memory. I have left the majority ownership of Carter Furniture and the workshop property to you. David has 10% to protect continuity. Mason has been given financial assets enough to live comfortably if he stops pretending comfort is failure. Your mother is provided for, but she does not control the business." I stared at the page. The workshop was mine? No. That could not be. Dad had never said that directly. He had asked my opinions. He had shown me client lists. He had taught me finishing techniques. But I thought it was just love. I thought it was time together. There is also a private account in your name. I created it years ago from profits your mother insisted were family surplus. They were not. They were earnings from custom projects you helped design before you understood the value of your own eye. I should have told you. I should have paid you. Instead, I let peace at home cost you recognition. I am sorry. I pressed the page against my chest. A sound came out of me. Not a sob exactly. Something deeper. Dad had seen me. All those years when Mom said I was playing around in the workshop. When Mason said I was wasting time with Dad's dusty hobby. When I sketched cabinet patterns and helped clients choose details and stood beside Dad at the finishing table. He had seen. Maybe too quietly. But he had seen. I read the last page slowly. Do not trust the first will they show you. I revoked it 8 months ago. The final will is with Samuel Keene at Keene & Morris, but I fear Mason has been pressuring him. If Samuel hesitates, go to the bank vault. Box 417. The key is hidden where only you would know to look. Inside the walnut clock I made after your 21st birthday. You said the second hand was too loud, so I never gave it away. I almost laughed through tears. The walnut clock. It sat on the shelf in Dad's study. I had hated the ticking. He teased me about it for years. One more thing, Evelyn. If they hid this letter until after the funeral, it means they are already moving. Do not let grief make you obedient. Do not let guilt make you quiet. You are not stealing from your family by protecting what I left in truth. You are stopping them from stealing under the cover of mourning. My hands shook harder. I love you more than I knew how to say out loud. You were never too sensitive. You were sensitive enough to notice truth before the rest of us had the courage to name it. That is not weakness. That is light. Your father, always. Henry Carter. The diner parking lot blurred completely. I folded over the letter and cried like I had not cried at the funeral. At the cemetery, I had cried in public, carefully, under everyone's eyes. This was different. This was grief with truth inside it. This was losing him again and finding him at the same time. David sat quietly. He did not touch my shoulder. He did not tell me to calm down. He let the wave pass. When I could breathe again, I wiped my face. Is it true? I asked. Yes. All of it? As far as I know. The will? Yes. The forged papers? I saw drafts. Henry confronted Mason 2 weeks before he died. My stomach dropped. What happened? David rubbed both hands over his face. They argued, badly. Henry called me that night. He said Mason was not acting alone. My mother. Yes. And Paige? She has access to legal contacts through her job. She helped pull records. Rachel helped Vivian pressure Henry emotionally. I leaned back against the seat. It felt like the family tree had rotted from the roots. Why didn't Dad tell me earlier? David looked ashamed. Because Henry hated conflict inside the family, and because Vivian knew exactly how to make him feel guilty. Of course she did. My mother could turn any boundary into cruelty, any refusal into betrayal, any truth into an attack. What do we do? I asked. David looked at the letter in my hand. We go to Samuel Keene first. Dad's attorney. Keene & Morris was a small law firm downtown, old-fashioned, with brass letters on the door and dark wood inside. Dad had used Samuel Keene for business contracts for years. I called from the truck. His assistant answered. When I gave my name, her voice changed. One moment, Miss Carter. I waited. A long time. Then Samuel came on. Evelyn, he said, sounding tired. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you. I need to meet with you. A pause. What about? My father's final will. Silence. Then, I think it would be best if your mother is present. There it was. David looked at me sharply. I put the phone on speaker. Why? Samuel cleared his throat. Given the sensitivity of estate matters. My father told me you have the final will. Another pause. Longer this time. Evelyn. Do you? I cannot discuss. Mr. Keene, I said, my voice shaking but firm. If you are holding my father's revoked or final estate documents under pressure from my mother or brother, you need to think very carefully about your next sentence. David's eyebrows rose. Samuel said nothing. Then he exhaled. Come to my office at 2. I'm coming now. That is not, I'm coming now. I hung up. David started the truck. On the way, my phone flooded with messages. Mason, Mom, Paige, Aunt Rachel, unknown numbers. I turned it off. Keene and Morris sat above a bank on Main Street. David and I arrived 15 minutes later. Samuel Keene met us in the lobby. He was in his late 60s, thin, gray-haired, with the nervous hands of a man who had spent too long hoping problems would solve themselves. His eyes dropped to my coat pocket. He knew. Evelyn, he said, where is the final will? He glanced at David. This is not the appropriate. Where is it? His mouth tightened. You have to understand, your father made changes during a stressful period. Was he competent? Samuel looked offended. Yes. Were the documents legally executed? Yes, but then where are they? Samuel lowered his voice. Your mother believes there are grounds to contest. Of course she does. And Mason has raised concerns about undue influence. I almost laughed. By who? Me? I didn't even know. Samuel looked away. That was enough. David stepped forward. Henry trusted you. Pain crossed Samuel's face. I know. Then act like it. Samuel closed his eyes. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. Then his shoulders sagged. Come with me. In his office, behind 2 locked cabinets, he pulled out a file. Dad's estate file. There were multiple documents inside. Samuel placed one on the desk. Your father executed this will 8 months ago. It revokes all previous versions. I reached for it. He hesitated. I stared at him. He released it. The will said exactly what Dad's letter said. Carter Furniture majority ownership to me. Workshop property to me. 10% business interest to David. Specific financial provision for Mason. Lifetime residence and support funds for my mother, but no controlling interest in the business. A separate trust account in my name. Dad had signed every page. Witnesses, notary, dates, legal, real. My hands went cold. They were going to bury this, I whispered. Samuel said nothing. I looked at him. Weren't they? He rubbed his forehead. Vivian and Mason came to me the morning after Henry died. They argued that Henry was emotionally unstable and that this will would destroy the family. So you hid it? I delayed formal reading until after the funeral. I thought it might be better for everyone to grieve first. No, I said. You thought it would be easier to pressure me after Dad was buried. His face reddened. That is not fair. Neither is hiding a dead man's final wishes. David spoke softly. Samuel, what else? Samuel looked at him. What do you mean? The bank vault. Samuel's face changed, a tiny movement, but enough. What is in box 417? I asked. Samuel stood. I don't know. Did my father tell you? No. Did Mason ask about it? Silence. I stood too. Did Mason ask about it? Samuel looked toward the door. Yes. When? Yesterday, before the funeral. My stomach tightened. Did he have access? No. Only Henry and... He looked at me. Me? Apparently, yes. Henry added you 6 months ago. I had no idea. Dad had been preparing, quietly, carefully, running out of time. I took photos of the will. Samuel made certified copies after Andrea, my emergency new lawyer, recommended by David, joined by phone and scared him professionally. By noon, I had proof. By 1, Mason knew I had proof. My phone turned on again as we left the office. The first message was from him. You have no idea what you're doing. Dad was confused. Don't let David manipulate you. Then Mom. Come home immediately. We need to talk as a family. Then Paige. Evelyn, please don't make this ugly. Your dad wouldn't want a legal fight. I looked at that message and felt something inside me settle. They were not denying anymore. They were repositioning. That was what guilty people did when caught. First, hide, then deny, then call truth ugly. David drove me to the Carter house, not because we planned to confront them, because I needed the clock, the walnut clock, the bank vault key. We parked down the street. My mother's car was in the driveway. Mason's SUV too. So was Paige's. Aunt Rachel's sedan sat near the curb. They were all there. Of course they were. Planning. I stood across the street, looking at the house where I had grown up. For the first time, it did not look large. It looked like a stage set. Beautiful from the outside. Hollow behind the walls. David touched my arm. We can wait. No, I crossed the street. I had a certified copy of the will in my bag, Dad's letter in my coat, and 32 years of being made to feel small burning quietly in my chest. I rang the bell. Mason opened the door. His face changed when he saw me standing there calm, not crying, not pleading, calm. Where's the letter? He asked. Hello to you too. He glanced past me at David. You shouldn't have brought him. This is my father's house too, David said. Mason laughed. Not anymore. I stepped inside without waiting for permission. The living room was full of family. Mom stood near the fireplace. Aunt Rachel sat on the sofa. Paige held a tablet. All three looked like I had interrupted a meeting they had hoped would end before I arrived. My mother spoke first. Evelyn, this behavior is unacceptable. I looked at her. Which part? Reading Dad's letter? Or finding the will you tried to hide? Aunt Rachel gasped. Paige's face drained. Mason shut the door behind me. Careful, he said. No, Mason. I'm done being careful for people who used my grief as a deadline. Mom's lips trembled. Fake hurt. You think so little of me? I reached into my bag and pulled out the certified copy. I think exactly what the documents show. I placed it on the coffee table. Nobody moved. Nobody touched it. That told me they all knew what it was. My mother stared at the pages like they were something obscene. Your father was not himself. Samuel Keene confirmed he was competent. Samuel is weak. Maybe, but the will is legal. Mason stepped forward. We'll contest it. Then do it. He blinked. That was not what he expected. I turned to him. Contest it. In court. Under oath. With discovery. With Dad's letter. With your drafts. With your emails. With Paige's document pulls. With Samuel testifying about your visit before the funeral. Let's make all of it public. Paige whispered. Mason. Aunt Rachel looked at her sharply. Mason's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. I know about box 417. The room went silent. My mother's face went white. There it was. The vault. The thing they feared more than the letter. What's in it? I asked. No answer. I looked at Paige. She looked down. Aunt Rachel pressed a hand to her chest. My mother finally spoke. Your father kept old business documents. Nothing more. Then you won't mind me opening it. Mason moved closer. You are not going anywhere near that box. David stepped beside me. Yes, she is. Mason pointed at him. You have been waiting for this for years, haven't you? Always jealous of my father. David's voice stayed quiet. I was jealous of Henry's patience, not his burden. What does that mean? It means he carried all of you longer than he should have. My mother's expression cracked. Get out, she said. I nodded. I will, after I get the clock. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway. Too fast. I noticed. Dad's study. I walked toward it. Mason blocked me. That room is locked. I know. He smiled coldly. So? I pulled a small key from my bag. David had given it to me in the truck. Dad's spare. Mason's face changed. I pushed past him. This time, he did not touch me. The study smelled like Dad. Wood polish, paper, old books, coffee. My chest tightened. Everything was almost the same. Desk, chair, bookshelves, the framed photo of Dad and me at my college graduation. The walnut clock sat on the top shelf. Still. Silent. I reached for it. My mother appeared in the doorway. Evelyn, please. Not angry now. Pleading. That scared me more. Don't do this, she whispered. I held the clock. It felt heavier than I remembered. Why? Her eyes filled with tears. Maybe real this time. Because once you open that box, you can't unknow what's inside. I looked at her. Then you should have told the truth before Dad had to hide it in a bank. I turned the clock over. The back panel slid loose after I pressed the tiny latch near the base. Inside was a small brass key and a folded note, not a letter, just one line in Dad's handwriting. Trust what is documented, not what is cried over. I almost smiled. Even at the end, Dad knew our family too well. Part 3. What my father left behind. The bank manager knew my father. Everyone in town knew my father. But when I walked in with Uncle David, the vault key, a certified copy of the will, and my identification, the manager's polite smile turned stiff. That was how I knew Mason had already called. People who expect problems always smile with their shoulders. Ms. Carter, the manager said, I am very sorry for your loss. Thank you. I'm here for box 417. His eyes flicked to David. Of course. Let me just check a few things. A few things took 20 minutes. 2 phone calls, a conversation in the back office, a request for additional ID, then another request to verify my authority. I gave him everything. The whole time, I could feel the clock ticking. Not a real clock. The family clock. Mason moving. Mom calling people. Paige trying to delete things. Aunt Rachel turning grief into performance. Finally, David leaned toward the manager and said, very calmly, if you delay her access one more time without legal cause, I will call her attorney from your lobby. The manager swallowed. 5 minutes later, we were led into the vault. Box 417 was longer than I expected. Heavy, metal, cold. The manager used his key. I used Dad's. The box slid out with a low scrape. He carried it to a private room and left us alone. For a moment, I just stared at it. David stood beside me. You ready? No. Open it anyway. I did. Inside were folders, a small hard drive, a stack of photographs, bank records, property documents, a notebook with Dad's initials on the cover, and another envelope. This one said, "For Evelyn, if they deny everything." My stomach tightened. David sat slowly. "Henry," he whispered, almost smiling sadly, "you old fox." I opened the first folder. It was labeled Carter Furniture, Ownership History. Inside were documents showing Dad had quietly separated the workshop property from the marital estate years earlier, after discovering my mother had tried to use it as collateral for Mason's failed investment. Another folder. Mason, Loans and Repayments. Page after page of money Dad had given Mason. Not small amounts, huge ones. Business rescue, car payments, debt settlements, failed development fees, private transfers. Every time Mason stood at family dinners acting superior, Dad had been quietly saving him from collapse. Another folder. Vivian, Account Activity. My hands went cold. What is this? David leaned over. Then his face hardened. The records showed withdrawals from business accounts, transfers to personal accounts, payments marked as consulting, checks signed under questionable authority. Some went to Diane, no, Vivian, my mother, directly. Some to Paige. Some to a company I did not recognize. David did. Rachel's husband's old shell company, he said. Aunt Rachel, of course. There were notes in Dad's handwriting besides several transfers. Questioned Vivian. Denied. Mason claimed temporary. Paige processed documents. Rachel aware. The notebook was worse. Dad had written dates, conversations, arguments, promises made and broken. One entry from 3 weeks before his death froze me. Mason came to workshop after hours, demanded I sign revised estate plan. Vivian says Evelyn will destroy the business. Mason says if I leave it to Evelyn, he will make sure she loses it in court. I told him he has already taken enough. He said I would regret humiliating him. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. David took the notebook gently and read the next page. His face went pale. What? He did not answer. David. He turned the notebook toward me. Chest pain again after argument. Vivian insists it is anxiety. Must call doctor myself tomorrow. Need to finalize copies first. Chest pain again. Again. My father had symptoms. They knew? Did they know? I felt the room tilt. He was having chest pain, I whispered. David's voice was rough. He told me he had indigestion. I didn't know this. I opened the envelope with my name. Inside was another letter, shorter, sharper. Evelyn. If they deny the will, show the records. If they attack your character, show the money. If they claim I was confused, show the notebook. I was not confused. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I allowed your mother and brother to take so much while making you feel like the selfish one. I do not know whether their choices contributed to my final days. I will not accuse without proof. But I know this. They cared more about control than my health, more about inheritance than peace, more about appearances than truth. Protect the workshop. Protect David. Protect yourself. Do not protect lies just because they are carried by people with your last name. Dad. I folded the letter slowly. Something inside me changed then. Until that moment, I had thought this was about inheritance, the workshop, the will, money, control. But it was bigger. They had not only hidden Dad's letter, they had surrounded him with pressure, fear, demands, and financial betrayal in his final weeks. They had watched his health decline and called it inconvenience. They had buried him with tears while planning how to bury his truth. That was not family conflict. That was cruelty in mourning clothes. I called Andrea Kim from the bank. I had met her years earlier through a client contract, but I had never needed her like this. She arrived within an hour. After reading the documents, she took off her glasses and said one sentence: "Do not speak to your family alone again." That was when I knew the fight had truly begun. The first legal move was simple: file the final will, notify the court, secure the business records, freeze questionable account access, request preservation of communications. Andrea moved fast, faster than my family expected. By the next morning, Mason was no longer smiling. He called me 11 times. I did not answer. My mother called 6. I did not answer. Paige texted, "Please don't drag all of us into this. We were just trying to keep the family stable." Stable. That word made me angry enough to shake. Stable meant quiet. Stable meant obedient. Stable meant everyone protecting the people who took the most. I replied only once. "Preserve all documents. My attorney will contact you." Then I blocked her. The official will reading was scheduled the following week at Samuel Keene's office, but by then everyone already knew the general shape of things. That did not stop the performance. My mother arrived dressed in navy, not black this time. Widowhood had become strategy, and navy looked more dignified. Mason wore a charcoal suit and fury. Aunt Rachel came with Paige, whispering loudly about how hard this was on Vivian. Uncle David sat beside me. Andrea sat on my other side. Samuel Keene looked like he wished the floor would open and swallow him. He began reading. The room stayed quiet at first. Then came the business ownership. Carter Furniture majority ownership to Evelyn Carter. Workshop property to Evelyn Carter. 10% to David Carter. Specific financial provision to Mason Carter. Residence and support funds for Vivian Carter, with no business control. My mother closed her eyes. Mason laughed once, sharp, ugly. "This is insane." Samuel stopped reading. Mason stood. "She manipulated him." Andrea spoke before I could. "Miss Carter was not aware of the will until after Mr. Carter's funeral." Mason glared at me. "Because David hid it." David looked at him. "No, Henry hid it from you." That landed. Aunt Rachel snapped, "This is not what Henry would have wanted." I turned to her. "You mean the man who signed it?" Her mouth tightened. Paige whispered, "Evelyn, please." I looked at my cousin. "You helped them pull documents." Her eyes widened. "I was helping Aunt Vivian organize." "You processed drafts." She went pale. Andrea opened her folder. "Paige, I strongly advise you not to make statements without counsel." That silenced her. My mother finally spoke. Her voice was soft, trembling, perfect. "Evelyn, I know you are hurt, but taking everything your father built will not bring him back." I looked at her. For once, I did not feel 10 years old. For once, her grief did not look bigger than mine. "I'm not taking what he built," I said. "I'm protecting what he left." He left me a life too. Yes, a house, support funds, security. He humiliated me. "No," David said quietly. "He limited your ability to harm the business." My mother turned on him. You always hated me. David shook his head. No, Vivian. I watched you turn love into leverage until even Henry forgot how to breathe in his own home. The room went silent. Samuel cleared his throat and finished reading. Mason refused to sign acknowledgement. My mother said she would contest. Rachel cried. Paige stared at the floor. I walked out with Andrea and David. Outside, the air felt cold and clean. My father's workshop keys were in my purse. For the first time, they felt real. The court fight lasted 9 months. 9 long months of filings, statements, interviews, document production, accusations, and family gossip sharpened into knives. My mother claimed Dad had been confused. Medical records proved he had not been. Mason claimed I pressured Dad. Phone records, emails, and witness statements proved I barely discussed estate matters with him. Aunt Rachel claimed she knew nothing. Bank transfers proved otherwise. Paige tried to say she only helped with administrative tasks. Draft metadata and emails showed she had assisted Mason in preparing transfer documents before Dad died. Samuel Keene nearly lost his license for delaying the will under pressure. He cooperated fully after Andrea reminded him cooperation was cheaper than disgrace. The hardest part was not the legal process. It was reading what they had said about me. Emails, texts, notes, Mason writing. Evelyn is emotional. She'll fold if Mom cries. My mother writing. Henry is sentimental about her. We need to make him see she will ruin everything. Paige writing. If the letter exists, find it before the funeral. After burial, she'll have less leverage. After burial. Those words stayed with me. They had timed my grief. They had measured when I would be weakest. They had hidden my father's final letter until after the funeral ended, because they thought a buried man could no longer defend his truth. They forgot something. He had raised me to notice details, and he had left enough of them behind. During those 9 months, I took over the workshop. At first, walking inside hurt. Every tool reminded me of him, every benchmark, every unfinished piece, every pencil tucked behind a beam. His apron still hung on the hook near the finishing table. For weeks, I could not move it, so I didn't. I worked around it. The employees were unsure of me at first. Some had known me since I was little. Some wondered if Mason would take over. Some worried the business would close. I gathered them on my first official day. There were 12 of them, craftsmen, finishers, designers, office staff, people who had spent years helping Dad turn raw wood into pieces families saved. I stood in front of them with my hands shaking. I'm not my father, I said. I won't pretend to be. But I know what this place meant to him. And I know what it means to me. If you stay, I'll protect the work. I'll listen before changing things, and I'll make sure nobody treats this workshop like a bank account with sawdust. Old Mr. Bell, Dad's longest-serving craftsman, nodded once. That was enough. We began, slowly, carefully. I reviewed accounts, called clients, met suppliers, canceled suspicious contracts Mason had tried to push, reopened custom orders. Dad had paused, found sketches in Dad's drawer with my notes from years ago. One was a walnut writing desk I had designed at 24. Dad had written in the corner, Evelyn's eye, build when she's ready. I cried over that sketch for 10 minutes. Then I built the desk. Not alone, with Mr. Bell, with shaking hands, with Dad's old tools. When it was finished, we placed it in the showroom window. People came to see it after the local paper wrote about the estate fight. The headline was tasteful. Henry Carter's daughter fights to preserve family workshop. My mother hated it. Mason called it a publicity stunt. But orders increased. Clients returned. People liked knowing the workshop would stay a workshop, not become Mason's development office, not get sold to cover debts, not disappear into family greed. At the final court hearing, the judge upheld the will fully. He also ordered review of disputed transfers from Carter furniture accounts. Mason was required to repay part of what he had improperly received. Paige was removed from any administrative access and later lost her position at the legal office where she worked. Aunt Rachel's husband's shell company came under investigation. My mother kept the house and support funds, but she lost all claim to business control. The judge's words were calm, but to me, they sounded like thunder. My father's truth stood. After the hearing, Mason confronted me outside the courthouse. He looked thinner, angrier, less polished. "You happy now?" he spat. I looked at him. "No." "You destroyed us." "No. I stopped you from destroying what Dad protected." "He was my father too." "I know. You act like you're the only one who lost him." That one hit. Because for all his greed, Mason had lost Dad too. But loss does not excuse theft. Grief does not make betrayal holy. I said, "Then you should have honored what he wrote." Mason's face twisted. "He chose you." For the first time, I heard the child inside his anger. The brother who believed love was a competition. The son who could not survive being given enough if someone else was given trust. "Yes," I said softly. "He did." Mason looked like I had slapped him. Then he walked away. My mother stood near the courthouse steps. For a moment, I thought she would speak. She looked smaller, not weak, just stripped of performance. "Evelyn," she said. I waited. Her lips trembled. "I did what I thought was necessary." That was not an apology. It was a locked door with flowers painted on it. "No," I said. "You did what protected your control." Her eyes hardened. "You'll understand one day when everything you built is threatened." I looked at the courthouse, then back at her. "Everything Dad built was threatened by you." She flinched. For a second, real pain crossed her face. Maybe because she loved him in her own twisted way. Maybe because she loved being his wife more than she loved him. I would never know. I walked away. The first year after the court decision was the hardest and most beautiful year of my life. The workshop became mine in practice, not just on paper. We renamed it Carter and Daughter Woodworks. Not because I wanted to erase Dad, because I wanted the truth finally written where everyone could see it. The new sign went up on a clear spring morning, dark carved walnut, gold lettering. I stood outside with Uncle David, Mr. Bell, and the whole team. When the sign was lifted into place, I thought of the cemetery, the hidden letter, the lies whispered over flowers. Then I looked at the sign and felt something settle. Dad was not buried under their story anymore. He was standing in ours. We opened a small showroom section called Henry's Room, displaying his best pieces and unfinished sketches. In the center, we placed the walnut desk I had helped design. Inside the top drawer, under glass, was a copy of one line from his letter. "You were never too sensitive. You were sensitive enough to notice truth." People asked about that line often. Some cried, more than I expected. I realized then that many people carry families like mine inside them. Families that call truth drama. Families that hide greed behind grief. Families that teach one child to shine and another to shrink. The workshop became more than a business. It became proof. Proof that inheritance is not just money. It is memory. It is responsibility. It is refusing to let liars become the authors of the dead. Uncle David stayed involved. He became my quiet anchor. Some days we fought, mostly about prices, because he thought I undercharged and I thought he worried too much. But every Friday afternoon, we had coffee at Dad's workbench. No ceremony, no speeches, just coffee. Sometimes silence, sometimes stories. One Friday, David said, "Henry would like this." I looked around. The workshop hummed with life, saws running, someone laughing near the finishing room, sunlight on walnut boards, Dad's apron still hanging on the hook. I smiled. I hope so. He would. I believed him. Mason disappeared from town for a while, then returned quietly 2 years later. He did not come to the workshop. But one morning, I found a small envelope pushed under the door. No return address. Inside was a copy of an old photo. Mason, Dad, and me as children standing beside a half-finished bookshelf. Mason was maybe 10. I was 6. Dad had one hand on each of our shoulders. On the back, Mason had written, "I hated that he saw you. I'm sorry for what I became." No signature, no request, no excuse. I sat with that photo for a long time. Then I placed it in a drawer. Not displayed, not thrown away. Some apologies are not bridges. Some are stones placed near a river you are not ready to cross. My mother never apologized. Not really. She sent cards on holidays for a while. Beautiful cards, carefully chosen, empty inside except for her signature. Vivian, not Mom. Eventually, I stopped opening them. I did not hate her every day. That surprised me. At first, anger kept me warm. Then it became heavy, so I set down what I could. I did not forgive her in the way people like to demand. I did not invite her back into my life. I did not pretend love without safety was enough. I simply stopped letting her voice be the one that explained me to myself. That was its own freedom. 5 years after Dad's funeral, we held an anniversary event at the workshop. Not a memorial, a celebration. Carter and daughter had grown beyond anything I expected. We had a waiting list for custom pieces. We started an apprenticeship program for young women in woodworking. We restored the old showroom. We partnered with local schools. And every year, on Dad's birthday, we built one piece for someone who could not afford custom furniture, but needed something made with dignity. That year, it was a dining table for a single mother and her 3 children after a house fire. When we delivered it, she ran her hand over the smooth oak surface and cried. "My kids can do homework here," she said. That would have mattered to Dad. Not the money, that. A table surviving a family. A place to begin again. After the anniversary event ended, I stayed late. The workshop was quiet. Golden light from the setting sun came through the high windows. Dust floated in the air like tiny sparks. I walked to Dad's workbench. The walnut box sat there now. The same box Uncle David had opened that morning after the funeral. I kept Dad's original letter inside. Not hidden. Protected. I opened it carefully and unfolded the pages. His handwriting had not changed. But I had. The first time I read it, I was shaking. The second time, I was angry. The third, grieving. Now, years later, I felt something deeper. Peace. Not perfect. Not painless. Peace with roots. I read the final lines again. You were never too sensitive. You were sensitive enough to notice truth before the rest of us had the courage to name it. That is not weakness. That is light. For years, my family had treated my sensitivity like a flaw. But Dad's final gift was not the workshop, not the trust, not the business. It was that sentence. He gave me back the part of myself they had tried hardest to shame. I folded the letter and placed it inside the box. Then I looked around the workshop, at the benches, the tools, the half-finished chairs, the walnut desk in the showroom, the sign outside that carried both our names. They had hidden my father's final letter until the funeral ended. They thought grief would make me easier to control. They thought the truth could be delayed long enough to become useless. They thought if they cried loudly enough, nobody would hear what Dad had actually said. But truth is patient. It waits in wooden boxes, in bank vaults, in old clocks, in handwriting that survives the hand. And sometimes it waits inside a daughter who has been told her whole life to stop asking questions. I was 32 when they tried to bury my father's truth with him. But they forgot who raised me. Henry Carter taught me to follow the grain. Never force the wood where it does not want to go. Never ignore a crack, because small cracks become breaks. Never rush the finish, because what shines too quickly often peels. And never throw away a piece just because someone else cannot see what it can become. My family looked at me and saw a problem. My father looked at me and saw light. In the end, that was the inheritance that saved me. Not because it made me rich, but because it made me unafraid. I locked the workshop that night and stepped outside. The carved sign above the door glowed under the warm lights. Carter and Daughter Woodworks. For a moment, I imagined Dad standing beside me, hands in his pockets, sawdust on his sleeves, smiling that quiet smile. I whispered, "I read it, Dad." The night air moved softly through the street, and for the first time since the funeral, I did not feel like his final words had been stolen. I felt like they had finally arrived.